Okay, here we are. Here's Joaquin. Joaquin was doing some work today. What is this that you're holding?
A plant.
Okay.
And you see like this rock?
Uh-huh.
It was in a plant. And it's like an egg, and I'm going to cut it open.
Okay.
And to see if there's crystals inside it.
All right, so we're going to cut it open. We'll see what's inside, and then we'll show them afterward?
Yeah.
Okay. See you after. All right, here we go. As always, hope you're safe, hope you're healthy. Start strong, finish strong. Keep your eyes on the prize, which may be a long way off, but if we work together, we'll get through this together. Also, I've been talking about this in our Google Meets, but just want to remind you, I highly recommend checking out the Michael Jordan documentary, which is streaming on ESPN. There's 4 episodes so far of the 10-episode series, and I think it's very inspiring to see people who are great, and to see where they started out, and to see how it's not just about being talented, but working really, really, really hard to get where you want to go. And I think that that's inspiring to all of us, given the circumstance that right now it's really, really hard work, but it's helping us get where we want to go to. So far in your Cold War unit, these are the tasks you should have completed. Task 1 about the United Nations. Task 2 was about the Iron Curtain. Task 3 was a set of multiple choice questions about the policy of containment and the Marshall Plan. Today's task number 4, will be about the Berlin Airlift, which we will look at today. You'll read about today. And on Monday, you also have a guided reading due. And the guided reading is following this new format that we created, in which you're using Google Forms instead of using Google Docs. This way, it will be easier for students to to complete these assignments on a phone or on a tablet and on a computer as well. So when you finish that assignment, you'll click on Submit, which you see highlighted there. All right, let's review. So here's where we've been. During World War II, the United States and the Soviet Union were allies fighting against Nazi Germany, fighting against Japan. However, when World War II ended, they did not stay friends. They became rivals, in which became known as the Cold War. During the Cold War, the Soviet Union tried to expand its influence so it could become stronger. The United States wanted to contain the spread of the Soviet Union's strength, contain the spread of communism, so that the United States could grow stronger and spread its influence. Today we're going to specifically look at the city of Berlin. So our aim 4, how was the German city of Berlin affected by the Cold War rivalry between the Soviet Union and the United States? So why are we talking about Berlin? After World War II, Germany was divided by the victorious powers of the United States, the Soviet Union, Great Britain, and France into 4 occupation zones. And the photo here shows an American soldier and a Soviet soldier. They are in Berlin celebrating the defeat of Nazi Germany, right? So Berlin became an important city for how to manage Germany after the war. So it was divided up like this. You can see the 4 zones. Great Britain took control of one zone. France took control of another zone. The United States took control of a zone, and the Soviet Union took control of a zone. So that is what was once Germany. After World War II, it's divided into 4 separate territories. The Soviets wanted to keep their former enemy weak and divided. They did not want Germany to be strong. Remember, they're trying to prevent another invasion coming from the west towards Russia, towards the Soviet Union. So they want to keep Germany weak so that they don't have to worry about another potential invasion on their western side. But in 1948, France, Britain, and the United States decided to withdraw their forces from Germany and allow their occupation zones to form one nation, which would be called West Germany. And that would then leave the eastern side, East Germany, on its own as what we would call a Soviet satellite, meaning it was controlled still by the Soviet Union. But you can just look at the size here of the two countries, right? East Germany might be concerned because West Germany is the stronger of the two Germanys in terms of size, probably in terms of population as well. Okay? Now, let's look a little closer because there's a problem in East Germany. When we look closer here, you should see the four colors dividing up Germany also appear at the city of Berlin. We'll highlight it real quick for you. You see it flashing there. That's Berlin. Berlin is the capital city. Berlin was divided into four zones as well. And what's interesting is Berlin is 100 miles away from the western zones. So Berlin, even though it lay well within the Soviet occupation zone, it too had been divided into four zones. So here it is again on the map. There's Berlin. It's in East Germany. It's in the Soviet zone, but the Allies controlled the western part of West Berlin, even though it was 100 miles away from their closest territory. All right, so how is Stalin going to feel about this? How is the Soviet Union going to feel about within this sea of red, this communist country of East Germany? There's a little island of capitalism, of democracy within East Germany in that little island called West Berlin. So here's a political cartoon portraying what they end up doing. I'm going to point out some labels in this political cartoon before I explain the message of it. Here we go. So I see some flags. One of them is the French flag. One of them is the American flag. One of them is the British flag. So this represents the three Western countries that controlled West Berlin, even though it was in communist East Germany. The bear in political cartoons often represents Russia. In this case, not just Russia, but the Soviet Union, of which Russia was the largest part of. So additionally, you can see the hat the Soviet Union is wearing has that one star on it, and that's symbolic of the one star on the flag of the Soviet Union, which represents their military. So we have the Soviet Union represented as a bear with its arms going around Berlin. Now, you might predict, oh, maybe the bear is trying to take Berlin. Actually, what the Soviet Union did is they cut off West Berlin from receiving any goods. So the Soviet Union cut off highway, water, and rail traffic into Berlin's western zones. The city faced starvation. No food could come in. They could not bring any other types of supplies in that were needed, and Stalin gambled that the Allies, meaning France, United States, Great Britain, would give up. They would either surrender West Berlin, and they'd say, fine, you can have West Berlin, or they would give up their idea of reunifying Germany in allowing their three zones to become one country. All right, so what should the Western Allies do? How should the United States respond to the Soviet blockade of West Berlin? Be sure to consider both the context of the Cold War, the Soviet Union and the United States are now rivals, and the U.S. policy of containment. Stop the spread of communism. Don't let it spread to West Berlin. Also, you have to consider the risks of any of these choices. So here's some three choices, some of which were actually considered. So A, retreat from Berlin. Just give up Berlin. This option was favored by almost all of President Truman's top military and diplomatic advisors. They said, it's not worth it. We don't want World War III. Let's just give up Berlin. Option B, push armed vehicles through the blockade and risk World War III. So show up with the military to go through the Soviet blockade at risk of starting World War III between the Soviet Union and the United States. This option was actually favored most by the American military governor of Germany. So someone who was there very close to what was going on wanted this to be the solution. Option C is do nothing. Watch as the Berliners steadily starve once the 3 weeks of stockpiled rations were used up. They had 3 weeks worth of food available to them. So one option would be to just say, well, let's let them use the 3 weeks. And when we discuss this in class, we also include the option of D, create your own solution. So think about it. What do you think would be best? Is it worth risking World War III? Do you just give up? Do you say, fine, we won't let Western Germany unify into one country? Here's what the United States did. They actually went with option D, create your own solution, and it was kind of accidental. So during the discussions, a decision was made as an afterthought. This was not the original plan. Let's just fill a few dozen transport planes in Europe with supplies and send them to West Berlin. We'll fly some supplies over because probably can't get enough there by plane. But this will just buy some time before a final decision is made as to whether to give up or to push through the blockade. These flights were supposed to last just a few days or maybe for a few weeks, because it would not be sustainable. But the Berlin airlift continued through one of the foggiest winters in European history and kept the city's residents alive. Almost no one in the world thought that such a feat was possible. In May of 1949, so it had been several months at that point, almost 11 months, the Soviets gave up, they lifted the blockade, and they said goodbye to the blockade rather than the Western Allies saying goodbye to West Berlin. Here's some photos from this historic event. In this photo, American and British officials are flying food and supplies into West Berlin. You can see many people are gathered there to watch the planes coming in. These are very large planes carrying lots and lots of supplies, but it still is a limited amount you can put on a plane. So in order to make this work, they had to land a plane every 3 minutes in West Berlin, filled up with supplies, filled up with food. They flew almost 300,000 flights. They brought 2.3 million tons of food, fuel, medicine, and even Christmas gifts to people in West Berlin. They had to land planes on rivers because there was so much traffic at the airports. This is an airplane that's equipped to land on a river and is unloading salt, an important necessity in order for people to survive. It was a very foggy winter, as we already said. Made flying very difficult. You can see at the runway here a lot of snow and ice on the runway, so there were some crashes, and some pilots did lose their lives. This is a photo of a pilot from the United States who came up with the idea of dropping candy bars from airplanes. You can see in this photo candy actually being dropped from the airplane as a way to sort of build up like goodwill within West Berlin and keep the people and the children of West Berlin happy despite the challenges that they were facing. So this went on for 11 months. And during that 11 months, there were about 100 lives lost. Not as much due to being shot down, but typically just due to crashes that occurred, although there was some interference by the Soviets to try to force confusion in the air and force some of those crashes to happen. So that's the rundown of the event. During this time, we're going to make a connection to food. During this time, a new dish was created, and I think it's important because it symbolizes what really was happening and the way that resources were being used. So this is a dish called currywurst. Currywurst is a popular dish in Germany even still to this day. You can see it here along with some French fries. Here's what currywurst is. The dish is generally eaten from a paper plate with a tiny disposable fork while standing up. It is an example of culinary cultural diffusion. So during the Berlin airlift, the people in West Berlin had sausage. Sausage is a typical German food. Americans brought ketchup. So currywurst is sausage smothered in ketchup. And the British brought curry powder from India, which was part of the British Empire. Remember, the British jewel in the crown at the time. And those things were combined into this dish called currywurst. And you can even add to it, often served with French fries, which are French. Right? So it's bringing together these 4 different cultures in one dish, and it comes from the Berlin Airlift when the British and the Americans were bringing these supplies, and the Germans combined it with what they had to make something new. Okay, so it's an interesting point. If you ever see currywurst on a menu somewhere, you should try it out. It comes from the Berlin Airlift, and it's very tasty as well. Berlin Airlift. So here's our vocab from today. Already talked about both of these, but here's clear definitions. Berlin Airlift. Soviet forces blockaded West Berlin to isolate it from the West. So British and American airplanes brought food and supplies to West Berlin. A satellite, that term came up when we look at the maps. Satellite is a country controlled by a larger and more powerful country. So for example, East Germany was controlled by the Soviet Union. So after the Allies leave, West Germany becomes its own country, but East Germany is still controlled by the Soviet Union. It's a satellite. It's controlled from the Soviet Union, kind of like a satellite in space, which didn't exist yet at this time. But a satellite in space is controlled from Earth, and it goes around the Earth, right? Or the moon is a satellite of Earth. It goes around the Earth. Everything is centered around a larger object. So that's the idea here with these countries. All right, so typically in class we would have a discussion about how the Berlin Airlift fits into this larger picture of the Cold War, of containment. Why is this significant? So remember, beginning of World War II, the United States is practicing isolationism. Hands off. It is not our problem. The problems of Europe, problems with Nazi Germany, we're just going to let it be. It's not ours to get involved with. After World War II, the United States is very involved, very hands-on. They must help other countries resist communism. They must contain the spread of communism. And remember, we defined it. They tried to stop the spread of communism by creating alliances and helping weak countries. In this case, they would be helping the weak city of West Berlin from having to give in to Soviet advances. The Soviets were trying to choke them out so that they would give up and become part of East Germany. All right, so what happens? Obviously, we know the Berlin Airlift works. As a result, for several years, many East Germans leave East Germany by going into West Berlin because it was not blockaded. They could just travel into West Berlin and they could say, now that I'm in West Berlin, I'm going to get on an airplane and I'm going to fly to West Germany and I'm never coming back to East Germany. So East Germany lost a lot of people, a lot of workers, and that had a negative impact on their economy. So what they decided to do in 1961 was to build the Berlin Wall, which many of you have heard about, but it did not exist until 1961. The blockade was sort of an initial attempt to stop traffic. It didn't work. So this is 12 years later. The Soviets build this wall around West Berlin, and the idea of the wall is to keep East Germans, to stop East Germans from going into West Berlin and leaving the country, right? We'll talk about that more as we get later within this unit when we talk about the Berlin Wall coming down. So here's your task for today. You're going to read this excerpt. It's just one page. You don't have to read the whole article. We cut it down to just this excerpt. Your task is to consider the risks, the risk of World War III, the economic costs, meaning sending all those tons of food and other resources, and consider the 101 lives that were lost. Was the Berlin Airlift a worthwhile use of resources? Was it really worth it? Was it so important to contain communism that it is worth the risk of World War III, worth the economic costs, and worth the lives lost in order to keep Berlin under control of the West, right? So think about what the goal was, right? The big goal, the big picture here, we're talking about containment, right? Stopping the spread of communism. So the goal of the Berlin Airlift was to, and then you're going to argue whether or not it was a worthwhile use of resources. So on one hand, you might say, yes, it was worthwhile. During the Cold War, it was important to make sure that the Soviet Union did not grow stronger. It was important to support and help people in capitalist, free democracies. Or you might say, no, it was not worth it. And those resources could have been used for something else. It was just one city. Who cares? Maybe building off of that, the idea might be, no. If you give up one city, it's going to be an effect where then it's going to seem like kind of like when Hitler was appeased, right? If you appease Stalin, is he going to ask for more, right? Those are some things for you to consider as you write your response. Don't forget, stay safe, stay healthy, start this unit strong, keep up the hard work, check out the Michael Jordan documentary. If you get a chance, I highly recommend it. Thank you, and let's go back to the closing of our video. Okay, so you're going to use this one, okay? Can you give that a cut right there? All right, now let me try with this big knife. I'll give it a cut. What do you see inside there?
Lolo.
Should we show them what's inside?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so here's what the inside of it looks like. Joaquin, why don't you tell us what that looks like?
It looks like it's Lolo.
Okay.
And it's gray. So it looks, and there's like little like plants inside. So I'm gonna see if I can get those out.
Okay. All right, let's take a look. So now you open it up more. What do you see in here?
I don't know.
No? Is that what you were expecting to find inside, or are you surprised by it?
Crystals.
You thought there would be crystals in it? So is this a surprise to you how it looks?
Yeah.
Yeah. And what's your conclusion then? What do you think about it?
I think it looks strange.
Okay. All right. Well, let's say bye to all our friends.
Bye.
Bye.
Everyone, what's your name?
Okay. We'll see everyone next time.